Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Martin Lee. I'm the manager of Talos Outreach across EMEA, Talos being Cisco's threat intelligence and security research organisation. And today we're going to be talking about preparing for those cybersecurity threats in a permanently hybrid world. And I am joined today by Graham Cluley. Graham, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Martin. Real pleasure to be here. For anyone who has had the misfortune to know me, I've been working in computer security for about 30 years, since the very early days of antivirus. And now I blog about it and I podcast about computer security issues on Smashing Security. It's a real pleasure here to be here today to have this conversation and talk about, well, really how things have changed, obviously, over the last year or so, but are probably going to be changing forever as well in some ways, and the implications which that's going to have for our cybersecurity.
Absolutely, I agree enormously. Looking back, I think 18 months ago, we would never, ever have imagined all of the changes over the past, 15, 16 months. Hopefully, we're now moving into a second stage in that we're not going to be confined to solely working from home. And we will be able to find some sort of hybrid mix between this working from home that we've done over the past year with also working in the office and mixing the two. So, Graham, what sort of threats do you think that's going to bring? What is going to change from a cybersecurity point of view?
Well, first of all, I think we need to celebrate a little bit in what we've actually done well, which is that it's quite remarkable how quickly many businesses did manage to turn into being an environment where people were remotely working. And actually, it kind of worked.
It was a heroic effort on behalf of IT teams across the world. Yes. I mean, really, I think anyone who worked in IT in February, March last year deserves a medal. Heroic is the word I'd use.
There wasn't much warning. Equally heroic were those of us who were also handling our kids' homeschooling and suddenly woke up one morning to find they were also teachers as well as working in the IT business. But that's tremendous that that's happened. That obviously, of course, introduced all kinds of security challenges. The fact that people were now logging in from home, maybe they'd never logged in from home before, they were remotely working. So rolling that out across a wide range of people. But now we're going to get this situation where some people will be spending maybe part of the week at home, maybe occasionally they're going to the office, they're going to be roaming around, they're going to be traveling, they're going to be visiting clients and partners with their devices. They'll be wanting to log in, they'll be wanting to access their databases. Are those devices going to be properly secured? And are you, as the IT manager, going to be able to oversee the security and make sure that nothing falls through between the cracks?
I think one of the key things you said is actually how so many of us have had to adopt dual personas over the past year. No longer were those roles of being worker and our home lives completely separate and separated by a commute between the two. Everything became merged. I think it's naive to expect that hasn't happened to our laptops and computing devices as well. I know a lot of people where their work device that previously was only used for work has been used for homework because simply it needed to be done, and the normal device that was being used for homework was being used for something else. Similarly, I think it's naive to believe that everyone could agree to what program they were going to stream over the internet, and we wouldn't have multiple people in households using their devices for leisure activity as well. So those clear barriers between work and home life, I think, have been dissolved for good.
I think so as well. I think this is a change which is going to occur forever. I mean, on a personal level, because I do lots of webinars and things like that, and I do podcasting. So I've got a decent microphone, I've got lights, I've got a camera. So I'm used to doing those sort of things. My son, when he sees all this, suddenly announces to me, well, I'm going to become a YouTuber. This is going to be my future now, he says. So I want access to that. I want a green screen behind me and all of those things. So this is a real challenge because, of course, there are other issues too, which is the potential for malware and hackers to gain access to your business through these remote devices, whether it be through phishing, stealing credentials, whether it be through remote access Trojans, maybe ransomware coming into organizations via these routes as well. So really need to be properly secured, and you need some visibility on what's going on those devices.
Yeah, I think a lot of us were maybe falsely considering corporate networks as some kind of bastion, a walled fortress where bad stuff could be kept outside. And whilst that may have been true in the past, as people return to work, those dual-use devices that, quite right, they not only use at home, but I think also we're going to see increasing use of co-working environments, so people not necessarily wanting to swap between home and the office, but also other places. And potentially, they're going to be coming back into the corporate environment, potentially infected with malware, although hopefully not, with things along the line such as remote access Trojans. I know, Graham, you've had years of experience in malware. What can you tell us about remote access Trojans and what they do?
Well, remote access Trojans are these pieces of malware which basically create a bridgehead inside your organization or on your device, which allows a malicious hacker to gain remote control of your computer. So it's as though they're sat at your keyboard. It's as though they can see everything that's going on your screen. They can type on your screen. They can move your mouse. They can copy files. They can extract information. They can even take over your webcam if they wish to and see what you're doing and listen to you. So it's as though you've got almost like a ghost, looking over your shoulder, able to see everything. And these things do not announce their presence. They don't tell you that you've been infected. And once you have been infected, whether it be via phishing or a scam or some poisonous malicious link, these things will then try and access sensitive information. And the hackers, once they've got this bridgehead inside your organization, will attempt to exploit that to maybe move laterally through your organization to find databases, maybe install ransomware, exfiltrate databases, and sensitive information, which they will then later try and exploit. So it's a big problem. And the numbers of new pieces of these rats, these remote access Trojan horses, are just huge. It's colossal. It far outweighs the amount of viruses, old school viruses we used to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many motivations behind it as well. I think it's maybe easy to concentrate on the nation state attacks, which are the ones that tend to hit the headlines. But I think we should reflect that most of this activity, in fact, the vast majority of these activities, is criminal in nature, simply because there's money to be made. And if you can piggyback off the back of someone's laptop, which is coming into a corporate network, and use that to find some critical system that you can hit with ransomware, potentially that's a lot of money to be made.
Huge amounts. Huge. I mean, some of the malware gangs have literally earned billions of dollars through attacking and through extortion and stealing data and consuming resources, getting involved in spam, all kinds of creating botnets. All sorts of things can be done through these kind of attacks. So it's something certainly to be very aware of. And I think we have to bear in mind this as well. During the pandemic, many businesses, have struggled. Many businesses had to find a new way to work. Well, that's no different for the cybercrime industry as well, right? Or the criminal industry, rather. Traditional criminals have probably had less opportunities to make money, and so they've gone online, right? They've thought, hang on a minute, we keep on hearing about these database breaches or these ransomware attacks, which are earning millions, ways of infiltrating inside businesses. Maybe we should get involved in that as well. So it's not all state-sponsored attacks. I think state-sponsored attacks make the headlines, but they aren't the primary thing to worry about. There are more down-to-earth communal garden criminal attacks, which are 99%, financially motivated. Those are the ones which you really need to protect your business from.
And there's a lot of innovation in the criminal market as well. In the same way that within IT, there's a lot of innovation and people looking to improve processes and do things better and spot business opportunities that they can make money off. The same is entirely true of the criminal marketplace as well. There are some very, very clever people out there who are looking at this current situation and have been thinking, okay, well, how are we going to exploit this to our benefit?
So we've seen scams, for instance. Quite often you will see an attack spread via social engineering. So the sort of wrapping they put around it to get you to click on the link or install the malicious download. And so there certainly have been plenty of COVID-19 related scams, which have been designed to infect people's computers. Also bogus COVID-19 or PPE testing and things like that. Websites and domains which are created. You have to, in some ways, I sort of admire the entrepreneurial nature, and I probably shouldn't say that, right? But you can kind of think, if you only directed this skill and this entrepreneurial spirit into a positive use, then that would be a good thing. But I think the average person on the street is surprised at just how grown up some of these criminal businesses are. If you get hit, for instance, by ransomware these days, it's quite possible you will find yourself having a live chat, just like you would with any other company, with them as you're negotiating. So you would have this sort of, they have online support forums where you can put in a support ticket and sometimes you get better support than from the legitimate companies, from the criminals, because they know they need to run a good business in order to keep the cash flow coming in. And so this is what they're doing. So it is quite remarkable how adept they have been at sort of altering their, changing their spots and basically reflecting what's going on in the real world.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Every criminal is a loss to the legitimate software engineering industry. Yes, if only these people could be put to beneficial use. So what are we going to do about it? How are we going to address these problems, or how are we addressing these problems? And most importantly, how can everyone out there start preparing for this new world of hybrid working?
So there's a variety of things. Some of them technological, which you should be doing probably in order to better protect yourself, but also intelligence-based as well. And I have to say, well done to you and your team on the Talos Intelligence blog, who are often coming up with fascinating articles where your researchers have really, they've dove deep into the malware and into the attacks to find out what the bad guys are doing. So make sure that you're staying aware as to what is going on out there, because it's fascinating stuff. I'm a bit nerdy, so I find it fascinating. But I think
just make sure that you read the Talos blog.
Yes,
I think that's the key point. Yes.
None of the others. None of the others.
No,
the Talos one is the one to read. But also, many companies are adopting principles such as zero trust, which is a different way of treating the security problem. Because, well, in the past, it was sort of like a user is trusted, and then anything which that user who has logged in does, because we trust Jim, we can trust that any process which is running on his device is going to be trusted as well. And I think we've very much seen this idea of, stop trusting everything, instead verify every request and every attempt which is made to access something or access some data.
But this is all part of a very long trend that's suddenly been accelerated over the past 14 months or so, that over the years, many people have been working from home, or have increasingly been working from various different locations, and also many enterprise applications moving entirely into the cloud, to being cloud accessed. So we have been, in a way, inadvertently preparing for this new way, this new world, by enabling different ways of access, and as you say, through not trusting users or devices until we've really had the ability to verify them. One of the terms that we use is SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, of a way of really making things easy for the user, so they only need to authenticate themselves once, And then once we're certain that they are who they say they are, they can then access all the other systems. I think one other thing that we should be well aware of, certainly working from home, just because you're accessing the work device doesn't necessarily mean that you're the person who's authorized to. And there's a lot of housemates or indeed nosy children who may well be accessing systems. And from a security point of view, we really need to be certain that that person who's sat in front of the device really is the person who they say they are.
Yeah, and I think this emergence of things like SASE it has really come about because we have seen this change in the way businesses work. Because the traditional way was that when you were working remotely, you logged into your business via maybe a VPN, and everything was being tunneled through your business and then maybe going out to the cloud or accessing databases. And now with a remote workforce, we have, it makes more sense for people to be able to access their data in the cloud directly. So SASE is a really great, a different way of approaching the problem, but I think it deals with that bottleneck problem much better. And so you don't have the bottleneck of going into the castle before ultimately going out. Because in the old days, 80% of the work and data which you needed to access was inside the company. Now it's in the cloud. So why not go direct to the cloud, but have that umbrella, have that protection around the cloud and verifying the access at that point.
And of course, the other thing that we need to do is we need to make life easier for security teams. That we're not that bad really at detecting threats, and certainly endpoint detection, such as Cisco's endpoint detection, really is pretty good at detecting malware. But I think what we need to focus on as a cybersecurity industry is making it easier for the cybersecurity teams to be able to spot when things are going wrong, and also to be able to better identify and respond when something has been missed. What do you think about that? Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ability to log what is being accessed and by who, to identify cloud-based services. So that's another way in which you can get assistance as well, is that if you have some sort of sense as to what your users are actually accessing, you may get some surprises there. There may be some benefits from the licensing point of view as well. You may find people are paying for services that aren't needed because there are other ones which IT department has already licensed, which maybe people should be using. So visibility is absolutely everything. So having a tool which can properly provide visibility as to what is going on throughout the enterprise, whether people are working remotely, whether people are on the move or at home, or indeed in the office, is really essential.
And also that visibility allows you to ask that key question: what might be going on that's wrong? And this is really how we've had the success in our own team of being able to identify some of the threats that the bad guys have been hoping have been flying under the radar. It's thinking about, well, what might this look like? What might it look like if a bad guy was doing X? And then going to look in the telemetry and the information that we have to see if that's happening. And indeed, yes, sometimes you do get some very, very surprising things that you can see. And yeah, it's all about enabling that sense of curiosity. I think the best cybersecurity people are the ones that are curious. And when they find something that looks a bit off and a bit wrong, really want to go into that in more detail.
I think this behavioral approach you're talking about is really important, because we know that there are hundreds of thousands of new malicious attacks being created and being pumped out by the cyber criminals all the time. In addition, your company may be specifically targeted by cyber criminals. They're not necessarily going to use exactly the same piece of malware which they might have used before. So they will customize it maybe for your environment. So looking not just at what you know is bad, but also looking at behavior which is suspicious and having some intelligence around that, and blocking suspicious behavior, for instance, or flagging it to IT administrators is a really important part of the defense today.
I've always said that at the scene of every crime, the criminal leaves fingerprints. And whether that's a physical crime or a cyber crime, those sticky fingerprints are always there, but you need the tools to be able to look for them. You need to be able to use a little bit of imagination to think what they might look at. But if you can get the cyber equivalent of some dusting powder and a big magnifying glass, they are there if you're looking for them. Graham, we have a question from Azam. Is the disawareness, so the lack of awareness of CFOs and CEOs a danger? What do you think?
Well, I think so, because they're obviously holding the purse strings and in some cases are affecting what IT teams are doing and what projects they might be working on. I would like to think with the number and the regularity of which data breaches, for instance, and ransomware attacks hit the headlines, that more CEOs and CFOs are becoming aware of the threat and really understand that security is essential for their business and for their brand.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's difficult nowadays for CEOs to sort of claim ignorance. They didn't really know that cybersecurity was an issue. You've been in the domain for 30 years now, and for at least 30 years, it really has been an issue, and it never fails to amaze me how much cybersecurity, or how many organizations with cybersecurity issues keep cropping up in the headlines. I would like to think that we would have got past this now. But I think CFOs and CEOs really have a very key place to play in this, because their jobs is all about risk, managing risks and managing allocation of resources. And I think with this cybersecurity, it is the same as anything else. It's a problem, it's a risk. If it goes wrong, yes, it can be expensive. But with the right resources, and I think most importantly, the right tools in the right places, it doesn't need to happen. You don't need to be the next organization that hits headlines for the wrong reasons.
Absolutely. Get the right tools, get the right training, give your IT teams the power. And I think as IT people, we need to learn to be better at communicating as well throughout the organization. So we have to get over some of the challenges maybe historically we've faced in that regard. And you've got there's no such thing as a 100% utterly secure organization. There always are going to be challenges. But what we're trying to do is just mitigate that risk and reduce it as much as possible, make it an acceptable level of risk. And if we can do that, I think, we can exploit this wonderful thing called the internet for the benefit of our business and for our companies.
And I think now would be a really, really good time for IT teams to speak up. Looking at the successes of keeping the lights on, keeping the business running, keeping people working from home over the past year, I think this is a perfect time for IT teams to say, hey, frankly, look at what we've done. And also for IT managers to recognize, with the lifting of lockdown, with this new hybrid working world that we're going to move to, now is a really, really good time to take stock and look at what is this new world of work going to look like? What are the risks? And most importantly, how do we empower our IT teams and security teams to keep everything safe and to keep those lights on for a long, long time more?
It's a fantastic opportunity. This is the time to really be thinking about this. If you haven't already done it, start putting this in place. Even if you don't think you're going to be, whatever reason, you may think, well, we won't have a huge number of remote workers. It doesn't matter, because the policies you put in place now, the technology you put in place now can work just as well inside the organization within those four walls, if that's what your business is going to do, as if you have a disparate workplace as well. So it can be done. And I think it's a sensible way to approach the future, because who knows when we're going to get another surprise quite like this? Maybe not as big a one as this, but things can happen. Disasters can happen to companies. Yeah, no, we're not saying that. But disasters can happen to companies. It may be that you have a reason to send your workers home or to send them to another location. So make sure that you can easily get them up and running as quickly as possible and as securely as possible in the future.
And it doesn't have to be a disaster. Change brings opportunities. You can look at these things as not necessarily disasters, but a surprise. And something that comes along that actually we can use to our advantage. It doesn't have to be negative. So again, this new world is an opportunity. It's not necessarily the tail end of a disaster, or which COVID has been, but it is also an opportunity. It's a chance for us to do things slightly differently. And also, I think, to look at best practices and how can we implement best practices and look at some of the best practices that have emerged over the past year or so. So we have another question from Min Kai. What is the acceptable level of risks, especially SMB versus enterprise? Yeah, that's a really good question. Great, Graham. Go ahead.
Well, that's a bit tricky. 17.
Yes.
What is the acceptable level of risk? That's kind of a bit impossible. It's kind of impossible to answer that one, really, isn't it? I think it's for different organisations and depending on the risks which they, in particular, face. I mean, one of the key things which you need to do as a business is look at what your crown jewels are, what your most important data, what is the lifeblood of business, what is the thing that you cannot afford to ever lose, and you'll have a different level of risk to that than maybe some other part of your business. So it will vary. But I think sorry, Martin, you carry on.
Yeah, no, I was going to say it also depends on the risks that you're exposed to. I often think about the different level of risk that maybe a small business. I mean, the example I always use is my plumber. He has a small business. Has an IT department. Let's face it, all the scheduling and his customers are held in electronic format. Yet the risks that he is exposed to are very different from, shall we say, a large defence contractor or government contractor. So I think part of this is also understanding, one, what risks am I exposed to? And then the other question I always try and get people to answer is to start thinking about what could possibly go wrong. If you start thinking about what could possibly go wrong here, you can start doing something about it. But if you're living in blissful ignorance, you can't fix it because you don't even know.
Yeah, and it is a problem, I think, for many IT teams, because if they're doing their job well, there is a risk that management might think, well, nothing happened in the last year. We didn't have any attacks. Therefore, why are we spending so much money or putting so much resource into securing the business? And so it's important the IT team say, no. Maybe the reason why these things didn't happen is because we were putting so much effort in. So it is a challenge, but like you said, a fantastic opportunity now to sort of reshape your business and the way in which you do work. And it may give you some tremendous opportunities going into the future.
Yeah,
well, it's been great chatting to you, Martin.
It's been wonderful, yes.
I was wondering if you have got any final thoughts.
Well, I think the final one thing you said which really resonated with me is thinking about what are your crown jewels? What are the things that your business really, really can't go without, and start thinking, well, okay, how can I protect those? And then also reflecting on how is our work, or how are our work practices going to change over the next three months or so, and how do we both seize this as an opportunity to improve our security posture, and also to think about what could possibly go wrong, what we want to change, how can we make things more secure. Graham, your final comments?
I was just going to say, echo in that, really. I think that this is a great opportunity now for businesses to reevaluate how they do their security. Make the change now. Start looking at this, because your workers are going to be, some of them are going to be coming back into the office. Many of the others are going to continue working remotely, at least for part of the week. So make sure that they are properly secured and take advantage of these new technologies to better secure your company and your data.
Thank you, Graham. And we've been here at Cisco working so hard on these new technologies. They are available. We can do it. I think we are in a very, very good position to protect against these threats that are out there. With that, Graham, thank you so much for joining me. This really has been a great pleasure. And also for everyone who joined us remotely, thank you ever so much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please follow our research on the Cisco Talos blog, and also take a look at Cisco security business and how we can help secure your enterprise. Thank you.